I've completed the construction drawings for this project, except for some adjustments that are going to be dependent upon your decisions. And there's several things I want to cover, both for the owner and for the contractor. First of all, this is what I had been working with, where I had only came out here 4'6" and had a 2'8" sidewalk. But once this is put together, I think we want to take that extra 10 inches and just give it over to planting there, and maybe even a little less, and widen that sidewalk to 3'0" all the way up. Now, you may disagree on either of those changes, but you can let me know. But this is what I'm showing currently. Continuing then in no particular order, this is how that looks then, with the 3-foot wide sidewalk centered on the 5-foot stairs. And 5 foot is the length of these planks here, so that you can buy 20 footers and just cut them and lay that up. Now, probably for one thing, I show cladding on the side. They have like 1/2 inch vinyl that you can put on the side of those stringers. And also notice this concrete is probably best just brought all the way to that margin of the stairs. This is this drink rail, and I show it engaging with these two. Remember, one thing that happened, and I haven't covered that yet, is that in order to use this drink rail, they only make this available using 2-inch newel posts. So the whole project looks nicer actually with the 2-inch newel posts, and I'll show you the change in those finished photos in a moment. But to cover this drink rail, I have it engaged halfway across these 2-inch newel posts. You may differ and want that to just stop where it hits the newel post, like that. But whatever you want to do, I don't think this is a viable solution, so I just left it at that for now. Now, one of the things to consider is that the concrete is for the contractor. The concrete starts at the door, where the top of the concrete at the door is level with the interior subfloor at 0, and then it slopes down so that it is at -2 1/4 at all of these edges, and all these edges are at least 5 inches high. But all those edges have to finish at the same level for all this drink rail to work out, and for the parts that hold these railings to work out. With regard to these Westbury railings and the columns, if you get these columns from the manufacturer, pretty sure what I'm showing here is a HB&G 8-inch column with their standard base. And where I'm getting to here is the prescribed distance from the top of the slab here to the bottom of this railing is always going to be 2 inches. So you have to consider how that is going to integrate with this column here, and also how you finish that concrete as it slopes down toward those edges under those column bases, and also how this molding down here is going to integrate with that. Now, you could have a simpler bottom where this is just tall 1x, but I'm trying to make it look more traditional. But that is one thing to consider. Now I'll show you some of these changes since the last time I made this finished photo for you. And I think you'll agree when all these newel posts, which I had thought would be best in 4-inch, and I was definitely mistaken, because I think these look a lot better with the 2-inch. That is what is prescribed when you want to use this drink rail. So now I'm showing all of these 2-inch newel post, and you can see it's much better without all of that chunky heaviness. So everything goes down to 2, and these ceiling lights, I got rid of the one thing to consider in all of this is with this high ceiling, that's about 11 feet 3 inches from the surface of this slab to that peak. And so one thing to consider is some sort of lighting to light this ceiling, because all of these downlights are fine and are required to light what you want to do down here. But these fans that I was showing have an uplight, okay? So when you look at your fans, you may want to get something with an uplight, because if you light that ceiling, it makes it seem even higher and the space even more open and not coming down on you. Because when all these lights are coming down, it brings the ceiling down as well. So some of these photos are just showing some options to get some light on that ceiling, and there's just a wide variety of ways you can do that. Also, some of them shift around these can lights depending upon how you want them arranged. Now, you had originally suggested 6, but these things are not expensive to buy or to run, and generally with the old incandescents you wanted them about 5.5 to 6 feet apart, and that was with an 8-foot ceiling. So these are a little higher, so that light has to travel down further. So I've arranged them around 5 feet apart generally. But once you look at the plan, you may want to group their switching as well. But right now in the switching, I have them all of those can lights coming on at once. Now here you can see I've broken them into a group. 3 on each side, they come on with a switch, and then the other 3 come on with a second switch if you want to control that lighting a little more exactly. This shows adding a wall light, which this wall light helps as well to light that ceiling. Anything that's putting light upward instead of just downward, which is the only option these things have. Also notice in this I've added some options if you wanted to add these exterior lights to light the yard, and maybe there's one here to light this grill. And now that same series of photos from this other end, that's those big chunky 4-inch newel posts, the much more sensible 2-inch newel posts, and then some of these lighting changes. Now there's another thing to consider. Right now this is how I'm showing this outside, where this finishes down at its minimum here. But you may want to have this beam here, this false beam here, a little more chunky, so that it would enable you to use a heavier false beam here at the ridge. Now before I forget to make sure I cover it, the inside faces of these beams coverings are 1 by 12, but that's not quite enough to get up to where we need to get to hit this ceiling. So I am just showing a piece of 2.5-inch shingle mold, and you might be able to rip that down to 2 inches and bridge that last gap, and that just dies against the J channel up here on the south end and against the inside of this beam, this false beam on the gable end. So this first one, permutation A, is showing this shorter false beam here. The inside board is a 1 by 4, and this comes down to a near triangle at this point here. And the alternative, and then up here, because there's not a lot of room vertical up here, this is just a 1.5 inches by about 2-inch board for this ceiling material to die against without gapping. But the alternative is to make the inside face of this false beam a 1 by 6 instead of a 1 by 4, and so that beam becomes chunkier. You can see it drops down here, and this has a little more space to work with here. we still have this skinny beam up here, but now we have this room, if we wanted to make that a more authentic looking main beam through there. And that's just that's a 3.5 by 3.5, what you see there. That's the two little ones, with the little ones and a short 1x4 on the inside of that. So yeah, those are those two. So those are those two, that one and that one, for your consideration before we make these plans final. Now I want to cover some of the electric service and electric fixture and electric switching plan. First of all, you have this receptacle here, out here, and I am proposing, or we're proposing, adding receptacles to the inside faces of these two columns here, and presumably to the inside faces of these two here. Additionally, we have one down here on the foundation wall below the porch slab for the smoker, and then you have one up here which can just be used for whatever. So looking at this, it doesn't matter. I mean, one way or another, you're going to be bending and using your left hand or bending and using your right hand, depending on which side of the porch you are trying to access. So whether it's on that side or this side. Now, there is room for a person to do this, where they recess this, where the only thing out here is the cover. Now, of course, it can't be this sort of cover. It has to be an outdoor cover. But it can be like this. And I'm showing it vertical because now this is a little easier for a person to wire for and to put in, but this is a little more trim. And you can see that even using the one that's recessed with a regular cover on it, it's still in front of the railing, so you're not having to go behind the railing to pull your plug out. And the only other thing I would say is maybe you want one or more floor outlets. And when I say that, I'm just thinking maybe one here and one here, because this is wider than code, and not that you have to meet code this way on this porch, but this is wider than it would be allowed inside. So perhaps you want to add a floor outlet at 1, 2, or 3 places perhaps. But this is one of the least expensive that I found. I like to boycott Amazon, but this is one of the least expensive I found, and it's stainless and it's waterproof, so you can put it right on the floor. When you're not using it, that goes down. So that is another thing to think about. And then in terms of these outside covers, you want to kind of specify this, because there's a variety of ways to go for that. Now, I would say that it's going to be mounted vertical, regardless of what happens anywhere else, that those will be mounted vertical. And so now it could be that these ones back here, these can be mounted horizontal if you want, like this one's horizontal here. So maybe you want those two horizontal, and you have to specify whether it's going to be a cover or with that box. So with the covers, these are just the different things to consider. This one you can plug in and have the plug coming out, and it remains waterproof. This first one here, vertical like that. And then this one here is also vertical, but when you hinge this is Sigma engineered. When you lift this lid, it hinges from up here in the corner. So it gives you that access and comes up and out of the way that way, with this one just hinging at the top. So that other one moves out of their way a little bit easier. So that's just something, that's just a few other things to think about. I'm trying to think if this one here, it's not going to be available hinged left or hinged right. So I don't know if imagining those outlets on the columns, yeah, this would work pretty good for the one on the west end. But if you wanted to work as good on the east end out there, you would have to mount the east end outlet facing south, so that when this lifts up, it's lifting up out of the way against the railing and giving you that full access. So hopefully that's not too much to think about. And I think this is a couple of little films that show this with just a cover and show it with the box like this. And in this first one, you see all 4 of those are in boxes with weatherproof covers. And a terribly quick look with them having covers only on them. So here is a little slower look. This is with the boxes mounted vertical like that, surface mounted boxes. This one just having a cover, this existing one. And then we switch to a recessed horizontal with a cover just like that one. And we do that on both ends at that south end. And I'm really tempted to do the same thing except vertical at the north end. But you will have to decide on that much. Certainly I think this is a better look than that for what you have going out there now. And the same sort of questions apply to the covers for these horizontal ones up here at the south. So that was the receptacles, or the electric power for your porch, along with the other things we talked about with regard to that, floor outlets and whatnot. In terms of lighting, these, there are going to be 4 post cap lights here, I assume, but I assume that those will be not controlled on a switch. They'll be controlled by it getting light and dark outside. And so I assume that those are non-switch. CWO means coordinate with owner, which means you have to choose these, and you're looking for a post cap with an inside diameter of 2 1/16 of an inch, because the outside diameter of these newel posts is 2 inches. So that is the receptacles, and then we start putting in lighting fixtures here. And we have the option for these exterior yard lighting here. And then this is how I divided up these cans. I'm not crazy about it or thrilled about it, but because those fans are there, I didn't want the lights above the fans. Whether that would create a weird effect or not, I wasn't sure. So that's how I did these lights, where these ones here in the center are kind of pushed down and up, but all of these are aligned with one another. And then I had horsed around, I don't think I show it, but I had, as you saw in some of those photographs, I had horsed around with putting additional 1 light or 2 on this wall here, again for that uplighting effect. But these dashed lines here indicate which fixtures are joined on each switching circuits. So all of these would come on at once according to this diagram, and all 12 of these cans would come on at once. Presumably that would be on a dimmer light. And then the 2 fans with the fan speed control are turned on at the same time. And right now you have a switch inside that's controlling just this light fixture out here, and that can stay there. And technically, I mean not technically, but if you wanted, all of this switching can go outside, but probably you want some of it inside, particularly these exterior lights here, these exterior yard lighting. And I show us switching this 1 gang box out to a 3 gang box, and switching that exterior yard lighting at the last location, and all of these cans in the middle location, and then the first switch controls what it controls now. But if you wanted to have a little more flexibility, okay, so here this was going to be with the fans controlled by a remote, but if you wanted those on their own speed control, then you go to a 4 gang box inside if there's room in that wall given the framing. And so in this, all the switching's inside. First one does this one, the second one does all your cans, the third one is your fan speed control, and the fourth one does these exterior lighting. But you might want to, put a couple switches outside. In this permutation, what I have is being able to control these fans from just outside, and the other stuff stays the same. This just moves the fan speed control out here, but this is what I kind of favor most, and this is what where I am now, where I have a 3-gang box inside, and the first location just controls what it does now, which is this single fixture. The second location is for all of these cans, and those are controlled from both from inside and from outside. And then the fan is controlled from outside as well, with again the exterior yard lighting on that last switching location. Finally, I don't know if you wanted another exterior yard fixture on that whole same circuit like that. We're back there by that smoker. Maybe it's swung over that way, and maybe it's on its own little local switch there on the brick wall, just for use at that little patio. So hopefully that was clear. And I had said earlier in the film, if you want to break these into 2 circuits, you kind of have to think about how you want to switch things, etc. And then we can finalize the electric part of the plan. And the last thing here is just these final finish photographs. I'll find them. Now, before I forget to make sure I cover it, the inside faces of these beams coverings are 1x12, but that's not quite enough to get up to where we need to get to hit this ceiling. So I am just showing a piece of 2.5-inch shingle mold, and you might be able to rip that down to 2 inches and bridge that last gap, and that just dies against the J channel up here on the south end and against the inside of this beam, this false beam on the gable end. So this first one, permutation A, is showing this shorter false beam here. The inside board is a 1x4, and this comes down to a near triangle at this point here. And the alternative, and then up here, because there's not a lot of room vertical up here, this is just a 1.5 by about 2-inch board for this ceiling material to die against without gapping. But the alternative is to make the inside face of this false beam a 1x6 instead of a 1x4, and so that beam becomes chunkier. You can see it drops down here, and this has a little more space to work with here. And we still have this skinny beam up here, but now we have this room, if we wanted to make that a more authentic looking main beam through there. And that's just a 3.5 by 3.5, what you see there. That's the 2 little ones, with the little ones and the short 1x4 on the inside of that. So those are those 2, that one and that one, for your consideration. Finally, I'll close the film by looking at a few this end shot finished photos from this end with solution A, which is this short false beam. And this is done just to demonstrate the effect. So when you shop those fans, you may want to consider uplighting. But this was just done to show you a general effect of lighting that ceiling versus not lighting it. So something to think about. And that will also have to be taken, if you do that, it'll have to be taken into consideration in terms of the switching. So yeah, that was that short gable beam, and this is that one that's a little taller. Same thing from this end. This is the short one, and really I can go with either of these. I like them both. Now here I've darkened that beam so you can see it a little bit better, but maybe that is just the same color as everything else. So that is it for now. I don't think I can do much more with this. I'm glad that I took the extra time to look at a few of these other considerations. So I'll be talking to you the next day or so, I'm sure. Thank you very much. I have updated the plans, and now I'm going to update this film at the end here with regard to something I had to add to the plans, which was dealing with this drainage here. This is from the downspout, obviously. It's disconnected, but this is from the sump pump. It's connected up there, and it goes up, and then it goes through a little flex hose here, and finally this is coming down at, I don't know, 30 degree angle or whatever, but we want to make that a more rigid arrangement all the way through, and that's what you have to work with there. What I did was transition that back to the house with a couple 60-degree bends here, and then strapped it to the house with galvanized hangers. So yeah, as this is going down, it's actually going back toward the house, and it's kind of like this in this film. So in this model, I used a couple 60-degree L's to get that back against the wall. The challenge is making that happen at a high enough point that this pipe doesn't drop down in front of that window when that happens. And back here, I just brought it down around this corner so we're not into this asphalt, and put a couple of drain tile adapters. This existing downspout is going to have to be changed where it has a couple elbows so that it moves over to the east a little bit and allows for that second one in there. And you can see that's a close call, having that 1/4 inch per foot slope on that pipe and keeping it above the window. And then once that dumps into these drain tile adapter here, there's a Y here, and we have a single pipe coming down, picking up this downspout and this downspout, and then to a pop-up drain down slope. I don't think that'll be too much water, and it could be that you want to just run these two all on their own to a pop-up drain down here, and then a separate piece to pick up these two downspouts here. But certainly there's enough volume, this can handle the volume. I just don't know what the output is going to be like down there in a heavy storm. So that is a review of that, adding those details to the plans.